Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Arundhati Roy's latest book has been widely covered by the media, and you're bound to have read one or more of the excerpts. It's partly an account of her troubled relationship with her mother Mary, but it's also autobiographical about select periods of her life. As a result, the book reveals Arundhati probably in a light you've never seen her before. Here is the book, and it has on the cover a beguiling photograph of the young Arundhati smoking a bidi. There it is. And now, joining me to talk about Mother Mary Comes to Me is Arundhati Roy herself. Arundhati Roy, your book is partly an account of your relationship with your mother, but it's also autobiographical about your own life. Let's start with your mother. I'll come to the autobiographical bits a little later. You write,
it's a biography of my relationship with my mother. So
okay.
whatever parts of my life have to do with her. Yeah.
Well, there are large parts in the book where you're not actually with your mother and you're talking about other things that you did, where your mother doesn't feature. Let's not quarrel over that. You write,
Okay.
you write in these pages, my mother, my gangster shall live. She was my shelter and my storm. I have to tell you, there are times when your mother comes across as a monster. I take it that was your intention.
Well, I mean, if you read the book and in its entirety, you will know that it's a book of pretty thorny and savage love, and I admired her greatly. And yes, there were parts of the book and parts of my life in which she was very difficult. But ultimately, I thought that, the darkness as well as the light is what made her, that full spectrum of her. And so it's not an indictment, it's not an accusation, it's just about one of the most extraordinary women that I knew, who happened to be my mother. And yes, there are very, very dark parts, but, she was an amazing character.
Let's start with some of the dark parts. I'll come to the light after that. As I read that book, I said to myself, your mother wasn't a very nice mother. You write of a plane journey when you were 6, when you commented on how her sister was, in comparison to her, a lot thinner, and your mother turned on you in fury. You write, you wanted the plane to crash, you wanted to die. You also write about when your brother was a teenager, and your mother said to him, you're ugly and stupid. If I were you, I'd kill myself. And frequently, your mother would call you a bitch. I can't think of another mother who would have treated her children like this.
So she was, the thing is that obviously, my brother is an amazing person. So, what she said about him is just rubbish. But the point is that she did it to us when we were very young. But what happened was that she had an extremely cruel parent herself, her own father. And she says that to escape from him, she married the first person that asked her to marry him, and then she left him. and ultimately had to return to Kerala, to this little village in this very conservative society where we grew up. And she just unloaded all her humiliation onto my brother and me. And and even in the book, while I'm talking about those things happening, I could actually see the process like a chemical experiment almost, how she just she just became so harsh with us because the world was treating her so badly, and she had also grown up in this environment of extreme violence from her own father. Of course, as a child, I didn't understand all that, but there was a part of me that, I just so adored her. And I yeah, I mean, those were hard things, and ultimately that's why I left home, as I say, in order to be able to continue to love her, because staying would have made that impossible. So as soon as I could, I left.
One of the most striking qualities of the book is that it is brutally honest about your mother and your relationship with her. But I often ask myself the question as I read it, are you being too honest? Were there things the reader doesn't need to know? Have you revealed more than you should have? Did that thought ever occur to you?
See, I'm not presenting something to a reader. That's not what I do as a writer. I write uh, what I am moved to write, and you can't start catering to readers and their opinions because there are too many of them. And to me, in fact, it would have been worthless if I was trying to present a version which was not honest, which was not both brutal and wonderful.
Okay. In the book, you deliberately refer to your mother as Mrs. Roy, never Mummy. There was a stage when for 7 years you didn't meet her. Tell me, how would you describe the relationship you had?
Well, Mrs. Roy was because my mother, when she left my father and came back to Kerala, she ultimately started a school. It began in the rented halls of the Rotary Club of Kottayam. It was just, there were just 7 or 8 of us. We had to go every day and sweep up the floor and the cigarette stubs and wash the men's glasses and put out our tables, and that was the school. And she didn't want other children to think that me and my brother had some special relationship with her. So she was the one who insisted on us calling her Mrs. Roy, you know. And so that's how I think about her. And, it's how would I describe my relationship? Well, it varied from when we were very small to, now. So one of the students in her school asked me, for the school magazine after she passed away, like, what, the same question you're asking, how would you describe your relationship? And I said, well, maybe as a sort of very respectful distance between two nuclear powers.
You mentioned the school, and that is very much at the center of the remarkable side of your mother. She created an amazing school called Palikudum, where she personally involved herself in giving bathing lessons, but also toilet cleaning lessons to the children. Tell me more about Palikudum. And it had, I gather, remarkable architecture as well done by Laurie Baker.
So Palikudum means school in Malayalam. And as I said, it started off in these rented premises, and then slowly, when it became successful from class 1 to class 2 to class 3, she rented a little house, and that became the hostel and our home. So I actually never lived in a home. I always lived in the school or in the hostel or whatever it was. And then she actually, when the school became more and more successful, more and more sought after, she raised a little money and bought this piece of land outside the town. And then she met this most remarkable architect who called Laurie Baker, who called himself a no-cost architect. And he built with local materials. And he was an absolute genius. I mean, building with local materials, building cheap, but building the most aesthetically marvelous buildings, which really affected me greatly as a teenager. But in the school, one of the things was that inside the little children's classrooms, there was a little curl, which was the toilet. And her thing was that Indians just are so, they don't keep their toilets clean. They don't keep anything clean. And we must learn to do it. So me and everybody else learned to become fantastic toilet cleaners.
Now, your mother also had a pretty revolutionary way of handling the students. When she discovered that the boys were teasing the girls about their breasts and bras, she responded to the situation quite uniquely, didn't she?
Yeah, first of all, in that town, to have a co-educational school was already looked upon with great suspicion and, what is this and so on. So she was quite strict. But when the boys started teasing the girls, as the classes went up from 7 to 8 to 9 about bras and, started behaving like normal Indian men or men everywhere. So she called two of the big bullies and said, okay, go to my cupboard and bring my bra. And she called an assembly and she said, okay, so this is a bra. This is what it's for. All the women in your life will wear it. And if mine excites you so much, please keep it. And it sort of changed the pH balance of boys and girls in that school forever,
Now, as I read your book, I get the feeling there were times when you hated her, but there were also as many occasions when you greatly admired her. When
I never hated her, Karan. I never ever hated her. I feared her. She broke my heart, but I never hated her, ever.
Okay. When you were a child, you loved her, as you write, irrationally and completely. And by the time your book ends, I get the feeling that you miss her. Your closing words are, "Bio, I'll be seeing you." And that's almost heartrending as you've turned the last page and say, the book's over. You miss her enormously, don't you?
I do, because see, I think what happens is that she was such a formative person in my life. I spent so much of my emotional energy trying to not hate her, trying to manage this tempestuous, wild person. She gave me so much too, she put so much steel in my spine. And so I became this really strange, peculiar structured person because of her. So when she died, I just didn't make sense to myself anymore, because so much of me was shaped in the way I am because of her. Not just because I loved her in some simple way, but because it was so complicated to handle her. So I started writing the book because I was so intensely sad, and I was a little ashamed of how sad I was, because, as you say, she was very harsh too, so I couldn't understand this intensity of my feelings for someone who had gone. And I mean, she was 89 and I'm in my 60s, so why it was something that I tried to write down,
In a sense, it was the coming to terms with yourself, the book.
No, not really, because I had come to terms with myself and with her a long time ago. I had learned all that. But it was also a challenge as a writer. Can I write this person without neatly wrapping a ribbon around her? Can I present the reader with this absolutely unfathomable person? As I keep saying, she was like an airport with no runways. You had to keep your aircraft in the air all the time. You could not land, But can I write this person? It was a challenge, a challenge to my craft and my abilities as a writer.
Just months before she died, in 2022, your mother sent you a text message, and it read, "There is no one in the world who I have loved more than you." You replied, "You are the most unusual, wonderful woman I have ever known. I adore you." Today, 3 years after she died, is there a simple way of remembering her? Or is it always complex, complicated, and even at times confusing?
Well, it's a book called Mother Mary Comes to Me, my way of remembering her in all her complexity. And that particular exchange, I took a screenshot of it and laminated it, and it's my bookmark in that book.
So that exchange means a lot.
Yes, of course it does. Because I feel that, I wanted her to go out like a queen. I never wanted to defeat her. I would never wanted to break her. And yet, I have also an extremely close relationship with my brother, who she hurt enormously. But the thing is that in the public battles that she fought, those were for me too, because I happen to be a woman. But for him, it was more unredeeming, and he has a different attitude and relationship with her and her memory. And I also feel that the book had to make space for that, because he's one of the people most beloved to me in the world today. Yeah.
Your book also mentions your father, Mickey Roy. Although your mother separated from him when you were very young, and I gather you only met him thereafter when you were in your 20s. As I read about him, he comes across as an alcoholic, a wastrel, a sponger. But
Oh, come on, Karan. That's a very mean way of...
No, but you haven't let me finish. I detect a sneaking affection, even admiration for him. Despite that description of him as an alcoholic, a wastrel, and sponger, I think you admired him and you were rather fond of him. Am I mistaken?
I don't think I would use any of those words that you used, and I haven't in the book. I mean, obviously, I didn't grow up with him, so perhaps his addiction didn't harm me in the way addiction could harm a child if it's in the house, So, and by the time I met him, I was 25, and I was through with this whole family thing, and I was very broke, and I was on my own. But I had no expectations of him, none, So I could actually just see this very droll, mischievous. I really liked him actually, and I found him. I mean, I do say in the book, I wonder why I'm writing this long description of my first meeting with him, which was absolutely hilarious and heartbreaking and all of that. But there's something about his sort of defeated impishness that I also think belongs in the pages of literature.
So I'm right in saying that there is an affection for him and as well an admiration for him that I rightly detected.
I don't know what I'd use the word admiration, but I was very, like he just thinking about him just makes me smile even now. I often want to go and put a bottle of whiskey on his grave in Burari.
Let's come to the second part of your book, which I described as autobiographical. You reveal that your first name is Susanna. You stopped using it when you joined the Delhi School of Planning and Architecture. Why?
Well, I think, when I grew up in that little Syrian Christian community, I was made to feel in 100,000 ways, that you don't belong here, you don't belong to us, nobody will marry you, you don't have money, whatever. And I was just, okay, fine, I don't want to belong to you either, So I just wanted to change and become somebody else, I mean, oddly enough, so I just dropped the Susanna. It was a little act of defiance. Not that anybody noticed, but anyway.
You were divorcing yourself, in a sense, from the clutches of the Syrian Christian community.
Yeah, I was just, I was not going to be part of the mergers and acquisitions that they call marriage over there. So I just was like, okay, I'm out,
Now, in the early years after you left home, you lived what you call the vagrant life. It was desperate poverty. How do you look back on it today?
Well, I mean, desperate poverty may not be the right description given what poverty is in this country. I was still educated. I mean, at that point, I was working and trying to put myself through college. But, being of this class, being English speaking, it gave me advantages that other people don't have. So, but yeah, there was no money. I had no money, and it was very, uh, I don't know, somehow I don't remember it being traumatic because I was studying architecture, and so I could work in offices, I could work in the trade fair, I could sort of make enough money. And me, as well as the person who was my partner then, as well as other friends who are still my friends, we all worked and sort of managed and didn't make a great tragedy out of it. Although, yeah, we didn't have money. I didn't have money to pay my hostel fees and so on. I had to live outside. But I don't look back at it, and think, oh my God, I had such a rough time or anything like that.
Those were the years of your first love, an architectural student who looked like Jesus Christ and who you called JC. Now, they say first loves are thrilling, even liberating experiences. Was yours like that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, like I say in the book, I actually met him before I joined the School of Architecture, because he was working for Laurie Baker as an apprentice. He had taken a break. I think he was in fourth year or something, and he'd taken a break. And I saw him, when Baker he was showing us around various Baker buildings when my mother had gone to look at Baker's work in order to hire him to make the school. And I was like, that's cool. So yeah, it was beautiful. And part of the reason why I got fascinated, a lot of the reason was Baker, but a lot of the reason was JC.
Did JC have a big impact on the young Arundhati?
Of course. I mean, how not? He was my senior in college, and we did a lot of stuff together, and a lot. I mean, those were formative years. Of course, I mean, JC did, but so did Carlo Buldrini, this Italian anarchist who had actually been in the School of Architecture in Delhi too for a while, much, 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 much older than me. And he's the one who's taken the picture that's on the cover of the book. I don't know how we still have that picture, but he lives in Rome.
The audience once again. There it is. It's that picture which is called Beguiling, Arundhati smoking a bidi.
That is actually taken in Carlo Buldrini's Barsati. Now he lives in Rome, and I'll soon be seeing him because my book is coming out in Italian next month.
Now, as I said, your book is brutally honest about your relationship with your mother. It's equally brutally honest when you talk about your own life. You reveal that you had an abortion without anesthesia, and if I've calculated correctly, you were somewhere in your early 20s at the time. You write, it was horrible, but it was done. And then you quote the evening train to Pachmari, where you were at the time filming. Looking back, was this an instance of incredible bravery or utter desperation?
It was recklessness. I was continuously taking the reckless choice from the beginning. So it was very much in character. Leaving home at 18 or whatever, first at 16, then at 18. And then everything was rolling the dice. But actually, this was I didn't have a choice because I was shooting this first film, Masi Saab, that I acted in, and we were in the forest in Pachmari. And soon after that, I had this very small 6-month scholarship in Italy. And so, there's no question of getting an abortion in Italy. So I had to do it.
Now, a lot of the book is about the 3 films you either acted in or wrote the script for. Masi Saab, which you mentioned a moment ago, in which Annie gives it those ones, and Electric Moon. At the time, your partner was Pradeep Krishan. Looking back, were those happy years? They certainly, as you read about them, come across as a very happy, satisfying time. Am I correct in that impression?
They were, I mean, happy might be a flattening of it. They were exhilarating years, where you're working, you're learning, you're shooting these, well, whatever. We used to call them lunatic fringe cinema. We were not, we had no desire or intention to make some big blockbuster. We were experimenting and certainly learning a lot, So for me, writing screenplays has a lot of honing of your craft, learning to write dialogue, developing an ear for language. And even now, I read the audiobook of Mother Mary Comes to Me and in London, and they were pretty shocked at the fact that I finished way before the time they had allocated, because I hear my language. It's more like a music thing to me than seeing it on the page.
But you're suggesting that Arundhati, the author, was created in a sense by Arundhati, the scriptwriter.
Yeah, I mean, Arundhati, the architect too, structuring and writing and learning to look at the world. By the time I was in my final year in architecture school, I knew that I wasn't going to be designing buildings for rich people, so I got very interested in urban planning and how cities come to be, what they are and what they do to people, who is planned for, who is left out. So all of that kind of way of thinking, plus design, plus screenplay, does inform the way I write now.
Now, this is when the first piece you wrote got published. It was an essay called In a Proper Light, but the publication happened almost by accident when the editor of Sunday magazine dropped by. Why don't you tell me that story?
Well, we had just finished shooting Electric Moon in the forest. I mean, those were days when there were no cell phones and no email, and we were shooting in Pachmadi, which is really very difficult to get to. And we had a foreign crew. Some members, like the cameraman, the sound person, and a lot of actors from outside. And unlike the usual Raj films, we were the bosses. The Indians were the bosses. And there was a lot of unpleasantness, I think, due to that on the sets. And when we finished, I came back, and just to make sense of the whole thing, I started writing this thing which was called In a Proper Light. And it was about the film and the script and how it, and I just got a new computer, so printed it out, and it was lying there. And the editor of Sunday, I think it was Veer Sangvi, he came over to pick up a friend, and he just started. We were living these 2 rooms on the Barsati, and there were many people and dogs, and it was all chaos. And so he just started reading it, and he said, "Who's written this?" And I said, "I have." And he said, "Can I publish it?" I said, "Yeah, sure, but you can't edit it." He said, "I won't touch it. I'll publish it." And so he published it, and that was the first piece of writing of mine that was published, formally in a magazine.
As you write in the book, you say it happened as casually as that. It was 1992, and you were barely 32 yourself.
Yeah, but of course, I had written Annie by then, which Annie gives it those ones, the film on architecture students, and that had won the screenplay award. My favorite award, by the way. Screenplay, best screenplay for the national awards, but also best film in languages other than those specified in Schedule 8 of the Indian Constitution.
What precisely does that mean?
English. Yeah, it was fun.
Now, when it was published and then became a phenomenal success, The God of Small Things literally changed your life. You became rich, you became a celebrity, and everything you said or did became news. And in a very real sense, that has been your life for the last 30 years. The name Arundhati Roy is not just instantly recognized, it conveys an impression, and people want to know and hear what you're saying. Of the
Karan,
many lives that you've lived,
can I intervene? Not everyone. Every day I go to a very local gym. Nobody knows me from a hole in the head. And I'm quite happy. Nobody knows about my book or about anything. I sign in under some pseudonym, of course, but I'm totally anonymous. So let's
but you're giving the game away. If you sign under a pseudonym, you're also admitting that if you wrote Arundhati Roy, you'd be instantly recognized.
But now it's been years, people don't know. I mean, fame is a very strange thing. Like some places you're famous and some places you're not, which is just as well. I like it.
But your book encompasses at least 3 different lives. There's the life you lived with your mother before you left home at 16 or 18. There's the life you lived thereafter, living in poverty with JC or with the prison. And then there's the life that you live now as the world-renowned author of Small Things. Of all the many lives you've lived, which has satisfied you the most?
They're all connected, and all the people that I have, we did the launch. I decided to do the launch of of Mother Mary Comes to Me in Cochin. My brother, who's a rock and roll man, sang Let It Be on stage, and all my friends from Delhi came. So many of my school friends were there. We all went to the school. So, it's an amazing thing. The connective, the underground, Pradeep was there. My girls were there. Everyone was there. These lives are not disparate and disconnected, All the sweethearts are still around. And I call it the Sweethearts International Network, SIN. So, yeah, it's absolutely, there's no disconnection between these lives. I go to Kerala and everybody's still there. The women who bathed my mother, who I describe in detail, the school, everything, So I don't see them as separate lives or anything like that. And I don't think
for having us with this wonderful story and a riveting book. I thank you for the interview. I thank you for the time you've given me. Stay safe, good luck, and take care.
Thank you, Karan. You too.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.